This is After School Empire, the podcast that helps teachers like you make extra money by launching and growing their own income-generating side hustles. My name is Tony Neely. I'm a veteran teacher and a lifelong serial side hustler. Through one-on-one coaching and leading school-wide professional development workshops, I've helped many teachers launch their side hustles, and now it's your turn. So grab a notebook and your favorite pen, because today is the day we start building your After School Empire. Y'all, welcome to another episode of After School Empire. As always, I'm your host, Tony Neely, and I have been so excited for today's episode because not only are we talking to a dear friend of mine, not only is he the best principal that a teacher could ever ask for, but he also has one of the coolest and most unique side hustles you'll ever hear. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today with Dr. Rob Stinson. Rob, thanks so much for being with us today.
Man, we finally got this happening, man. We've been trying for months, but here we are.
The life of an administrator. I mean, life is busy when you're a principal, which makes the fact that, it just shows people who say, I don't have time to have a side hustle. That's just an excuse. If you as a principal with a kid in kindergarten, a wife who's also a teacher, a kid who just started high school and all this can have a side hustle, then any teacher can.
Oh, for sure. And it's all about I'm an administrator and we have busy lives, but it's also about surrounding yourself with people that can help you and share the burden. Because honestly, one of the things that you and I have always had in common is we believe in a healthy work-life balance. And so, I work hard, but when I come home, I play hard too. And I have plenty of time to do that. And we've not missed each other because of overscheduling. Like my admin life it's just because Tanya and I, my wife, we live very full lives, and we do a lot of fun stuff and we enjoy life. And that's part of this side hustle that I'm involved in,
Yeah, let's just jump straight into that, because I've kind of been teasing it some on social media that I had somebody coming that has the coolest side hustle. Tell us, Dr. Stinson, what is your side hustle?
Well, if you guys are familiar in the independent wrestling scene, some of you might know me as Robbie Roode, formerly the commissioner of the American Wrestling Federation. I was eventually removed from that position for corrupt practices, allegedly. And now I manage a growing empire. This is the after school empire, after all, called Robbie Roode Enterprises, one of the most dominant forces in independent wrestling. I've also been fortunate to run the social medias, or be a part of a team that ran the social medias for the National Wrestling Alliance, the oldest and most prestigious professional wrestling organization in the world. This is the company that most people would associate with names like Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Harley Race, Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk. I mean, the Road Warriors, the list goes on and on and on. And that company is presently owned by Billy Corgan, who is the lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins. His company is Lightning One Productions, and that is the parent company of the NWA. So I got to work directly with Mr. Corgan for a number of years, and it was one of the great privileges of my life, honestly.
So there's two different pathways we'll end up going down there. One of you as talent and one of you behind the scenes doing the social media side. How did you get into professional wrestling?
Being a mega fan, really. I mean, I wrestling has always been a part of my life, even as a little kid. My distinctively earliest memory in my life is my brother and I wrestling, or my dad taking my brother and I down into Chatsworth to see the fabulous Freebirds come into town. He taught us to root for the bad guys. I've always rooted for the bad guys, but, in pro wrestling, it's something that hasn't appealed to me for some reason. I don't know, because I'm an administrator and a parent. So I try to promote virtue in our kids, but when it comes to pro wrestling, it seems to go the opposite way. But I just was a mega fan, and I've been present. I went to a lot of big shows and a lot of local shows, and the one thing about local shows, if you become a mainstay in the audience, eventually, somehow, some way, certain fans make it into the storylines, and that's really how it began with me. A couple of friends of mine used to go to the AWF show in Ringgold. We always bought ringside tickets. We were clever, we create these real clever signs, that had clever sayings and insults and stuff on there and everything. And eventually they would draw us into storylines. And it got to the point where eventually they were like, "Hey man, would you come in, and we've got this idea for you." Paul Lee, who's the owner and promoter of the AWF, now he shares those responsibilities with Lakely. Actually, I co-produce some of those shows now because I've been around so long with them. But he came in and was like, "Man, I want to bring you in and make you a manager. I want to call you, Robbie Rich. And I thought, I don't think that's going to work, man, because, Tommy Rich is one of the greatest baby faces and you're obviously going to use me as a bad guy. So what about calling me Robbie Rude? And that's the day Robbie Rude was born. That happened in 2005 and I've been doing it since. And, thanks to, Paul Lee, and I really owe it all to him and the Lee family, Lex, Tanya, LP, Peyton, and just pulling back the veil in a very secret world. Pro wrestling is a very secretive world. They welcomed me in and they, because of them, I had opportunities to eventually meet people that landed me with the National Wrestling Alliance. And so, it all just started just by being a persistent fan and showing up all the time, being persistent and just pursuing something that I loved.
So let's go over to one of the first times you and I ever went out to lunch together. I'm a music nerd, absolute music nerd. And I had to, hide my fanboyism a little bit because while we were, grabbing a beverage and I think eating some pizza, you got a text on your phone. You're like, it's Billy Corgan sending me a message. Tell me a little bit about that connection with them and how you got brought in to help with, their podcast, their social media. What did the origin of that relationship look like?
So I have been a fan of the NWA my whole life, and the NWA has gone through, and I don't want to get into too much in the weeds here, but just a quick snapshot. The NWA at one time was an international brand, and it competed with the WWF, now the WWE. Well, through a number of iterations and business exchanges and ebbs and flows in the pro wrestling market, the NWA eventually kind of fell by the wayside. It never died. It went into the wilderness, as it were. It was always vibrant. Don't get me wrong. Like the NWA has been consistent. And there's some of the greatest talent in the history of pro wrestling worked during those, what I call the wilderness years, where the NWA was not a mainstay product. It was sort of eventually become really an independent territory, as it were. The WCW kind of took over and it was WCW versus WWE. Well, I always followed the NWA. There was there's a guy named Jay Cal out in California. Some of my friends, Gary Horn and a few others, they always followed this company. And eventually it made its way back into prominence through Impact or TNA. Jeff Jarrett, legendary promoter, ended up, buying this. And eventually Billy Corgan, who is a lifelong wrestling fan, baseball fan, rock god, all that, he also became involved. And eventually he purchased the company. Well, that brings us up to about 2020. Now, mind you, the NWA started, you could make the case that the NWA goes back to like the 1880s. Like you can make that case. We have made that case before on our own podcast. But bring us up to the pandemic, essentially. Everything shut down. The NWA had just really started being really a cool, it was a buzz in the wrestling world because they were doing NWA Power. It was a YouTube only show, but they were doing these events at the GPB studios in Atlanta, Georgia. And it really felt like the 80s where they were big time and they were doing something really special. And then the pandemic hit and, everything shut down. Everything. They had shows where, the Crockett Cup was about to happen, which is one of the most prestigious events they did. We actually bought tickets. My whole family bought tickets for that, 2 weeks before the shutdowns. And they were like, we don't know how long this is going to happen. So when the pandemic happened, which was a terrible time, but there's also a lot of silver linings because during that time, and this, Tony, the podcasting movement became really big. Like it blew up because people had all this time. And there was an NWA podcast. It was not an official podcast. It was a fan podcast, essentially. But these are people that were at the shows. These are people that like we admired, even though they weren't officially NWA, like they were enough, closely associated with the company that I followed this podcast and I listened to it religiously. And they would do these live streams, and me and Piper, my daughter, she loves performance art when wrestling is performance art. So we would go on and we would participate in the live chats, and eventually, something happened. And there are a lot of things here and we could go down this forever, but basically what happened was Professional Wrestling Illustrated, which is the premier wrestling magazine, ended up having an interview with Gary Horn, who was one of the co-hosts of this unofficial NWA show. And I had been interacting with Gary, who's now a really great friend of mine. And he called me and said, "Hey man, listen, I'm doing this interview with PWI. They want to know why we should declare the NWA title, why we should make it a world title again. It used to be the world championship. When it fell into the wilderness days, they lost their world title status. And it was basically just the WWF or WWE. And so Gary was going to go on and make the case why this should be a world title. And he called me and I just started laying it out. I just started spitting history. And it's like, dude, I can't remember that. Just come on the podcast with me. So I came on and I never left. So I joined the podcast that day. And it's funny, I've got the issue of PWI and they mentioned this conversation. And based on that, they granted us and Impact and a few other independent federations world title status. This is like Sports Illustrated saying that your trophy is equivalent to the NFL's, to the Lombardi Trophy, or your trophy is equivalent to the Governor's Cup or the World Series trophy. That's essentially what it's like because they have that much clout. And so anyway, so I joined this show and I came on as a personality. By that time, it was me, Gary, and Will Martin. And we were doing this and we had, because we were so fervent and because we were such a respected, consistent voice, some of the talent started reaching out, most notably Nick Aldis, the world's champion, the one of the greatest wrestlers in the world, who is now the general manager of SmackDown and a good personal friend of mine. Thunder Rosa, who was the women's champion at the time. Had built these personal relationships with them because during the pandemic, we were the voice, like we were the ones promoting them and keeping their brand alive. And so eventually, our names landed on the desk of Billy Corgan and we made a pitch saying, "Hey, we want to be the official voice of the NWA." And guess what? Boom. He hired us and we became Billy Corgan's mouthpiece for the National Wrestling Alliance. And we were running the social medias on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. Twitter was much bigger then. The presence was bigger than it is now. But we were doing that, and that was just through persistence and just loving the product, man. It's not like I never felt like we were working hard. I was putting in a lot of hours. It would annoy my wife quite a bit, but it was just really love for the sport, And
I know when we first started working together, there were a couple times that you were like, "Hey, I'm going to be out on Thursday because we're flying out for a pay-per-view event or something."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I've never had an administrator like that before.
And that goes into having, again, I have great coworkers. Like, I'm not trying to toot my own horn at all because I'm allowed to do what I do because I have great support. But I think, when you're a principal of a school, there are a million things that anybody can do. There are certain things that only I can do, but my mindset is to make my school as efficient as possible. And that means that I need to, devolve a lot of leadership responsibility upon other people and do it without question because I trust them. So Jerry Lindley and Tobin Davidson, my assistant principals, and then other, people at our school like you, Allison Eisenberg, Steve Lewis. These are people that I trust, like infinitely. I trust them. So I don't need to follow up on them. They can do the day to day and let me be in classrooms and go off and do my NWA hobby and stuff like that.
Thanks so much for listening. I want to take just one quick second and ask you a question. What would you do with an extra $800 in your pocket? Would you use it to pay down debt? Buy some new sporting equipment for your kids' upcoming season? Or would you splurge on those concert tickets for that band you just can't wait to see? Well, in July alone, I made $800 flipping shoes online. Flipping shoes is a fantastic side hustle for teachers to get into because it's an easy side hustle to start. It doesn't take a lot of capital, and with a little bit of training, you can start making money now. So if you're interested in getting your feet wet into the world of flipping shoes as a side hustle, go over to afterschoolemempire.com/shoes. There's some great information for you, and if you're interested, I also have an online course you can sign up for. If nothing else, be sure to get my free Get or Forget shoe guide. That's going to tell you, hey, here are shoes that are selling really well right now, and here's ones that are better left sitting at that yard seller or the thrift store. So again, just go to afterschoolemempire.com/shoes to find out more. And now back to the show. I know you've been talking about your NWA side hustle, your role there in the past tense. So what is your role with NWA now?
I basically serve as sort of like historian emeritus. Like I'm no longer doing the social media. And that was really because, as after the pandemic, as things picked up, it became almost a full-time job. I mean, we were doing 30, 40 hours a week. And as efficient as I am, I'm pretty efficient. I'm not that efficient to run a school and do that in a way that the brand deserves, because the NWA is such a great company, with great people and all that, and they deserve somebody that can commit full time. So I still pop in from time to time as almost like a guest they do a show on Mondays, a little like a weekly recap. And, Gary Horn still does that, but he has some on-air talent, like the CEO of the NWA, Kyle Davis and Danny Dills and some other people come on and they bring in some talent. I'll show up every once in a while. But I guess my main responsibility now is is historian emeritus. That's what I call it, because on a random Saturday, I'll get an email from Billy Corgan. And usually I try to tell my staff at work, listen, unless it's life, limb, or eyesight, let's respect each other on the weekends. Don't send me email, because my whole philosophy is never touch a piece of paper twice. If I see it, I got to deal with it then. But if I see something from Billy, you best believe I'm dealing with it then. So I'll get an email like on Saturday morning, hey, what do you know about the Midwest Championship? And so I'll go into research mode and start, I'll crank out a little monograph for them. Like when they brought back the junior heavyweight championship, I sent them a little 8-page monograph on the history, some of the belt designs and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of thing that I do now. Like they're in Philadelphia this weekend for NWA 76, the 76th anniversary of the company. Formally, informally, like I said, it goes back to the 1880s, but, I'll get an email from Kyle Davis saying, hey man, how many times did, this tag team hold the world tag championships, or have there ever been any champions from India or something like that, and I'll go into I've got extensive records here in my house and a good database that I've built myself. And I can usually get that stuff really quick. Most of the time they could probably go to Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is somewhat reliable. So they'll call me. And so, so I'll deal with that. I just talked to Gary Horn, a couple of weeks ago about, personal stuff, but we talked a lot about what was going on in Philadelphia and the historical significance of that and that kind of thing. So now, my role is more, consulting, call as you need me, that kind of thing. But I'm always welcome there. I mean, they've made me feel nothing but welcome. And, like I said, I still keep in touch with them. So
that's your behind the scenes role.
Yes.
Now let's kind of briefly get into you as talent. I had the opportunity to take my 5-year-old son, Avit, to his first wrestling event to come watch you wrestle. And he absolutely had the time of his life. And it was really funny because you're a villain. You're, booed by the crowd. And here's my 5-year-old going, hi, Dr. Rob. Hi, Dr. Rob. So tell us a little bit about, what your current role is, since you've kind of put the running social media for NWA to the side. Tell us more about what you're doing as Robbie Roode and Robbie Roode Enterprises.
So you got to think of this as like community theater, or that kind of thing, where I'm doing some production. I'll probably get more into that. Lex Lee is essentially like a brother of mine. I mean, we've worked together for years. We butted heads a lot creatively. He's a visionary. He's had the best upbringing you could ask for. He's got strong opinions on wrestling. I've got strong opinions on wrestling, and sometimes they cross, sometimes they don't, but that's just part of wrestling. I guess one of the unique things is that I play a role in a community where I'm a prominent figure. I can't go anywhere without somebody knowing me. And in virtually every show I go, there are students there. Or there's someone like Avit, and I've known Avit, over half of his life. So he's never known a time in his life where he hasn't known me in some capacity. And I'm supposed to be a bad guy. And, there he is. Hey, Doc Rob, or, Allison Eisenberg has a son. Allison Eisenberg, for the listener, she's a legendary teacher, just a great teacher. I've known her forever. and she should be a Georgia Teacher of the Year at some point. She's fantastic. She's ready to be an administrator today, Well, her son Colton, and my daughter Piper are very close in age, and they've known each other their whole lives. And so he comes to the show, this last show, which was it was a huge show, and it was one of the more brutal shows. I mean, it was cage matches. So there was it got bloody and that kind of thing, which, some people had mixed feelings about, but it did. And, I'm looking over, out in the in the audience, and I'm looking to be booed. That's if I'm getting booed, I'm doing my job. And I see Colton just like vigorously waving at me. And I'm like, I'm trying so hard not to look over there because it's going to make me break character, So, but yeah, so basically I co-produce a show, called AWF Viral. And this is a YouTube show that comes on about once a month. And it basically highlights some of the major events from the previous live event, which happened in Ringgold, Georgia, at the Circus Center Arena. And, it's a lot of fun to do.
It is a lot of fun.
Yes.
From the time you get there, it's a show.
And when you think of pro wrestling in a town like Ringgold, it's a growing town, but it's still a southern small town, you're going to see the whole spectrum of culture in an audience. You're going to see very stabby people. You're going to see, your grassroots people. You're going to see the whole, a microcosm of the whole community is going to be in the audience. It's a lot of fun sometimes just to watch the audience. And some of them are believers. Like I hesitate to say this because I know this is a family show.
I know this story, but I was wondering if it was going to come out at some point.
I've had a gun pulled on me, like legit. A gun was like 3 feet from my face, and the gun was loaded. Like I could have died. And, and it was like, it was so, and that, part of me is like, wow, that's how good a bad guy I was. And you got to understand, I've been the biggest bad guy in the AWF, me and a couple of others. Even Paul Lee, the Nature Boy Paul Lee, he's historically been the biggest heel, but he's a good guy, right? He's a big baby face right now. I mean, people love him, and we're at odds right now. But when someone pulls a gun in your face, I mean, you did your job that night. Unscripted, legit. No, it happened.
Somebody, yeah,
it was crazy. So you don't want your side hustle to go down that route, which could end abruptly. But fortunately, I mean, that's the only time, one or two, maybe one other time I've ever been in harm's way ever in wrestling. I've been in bigger predicaments at middle school basketball games than I've been. I mean, notwithstanding the gun incident. Now, you take that away. But I would say this, I'm more regularly involved in conflict at a middle school sporting event than I am at pro wrestling, other than portraying who I am. All in all, the pro wrestling shows are family friendly. They are morality plays. They're Greek drama, Greek mythology. And that plays out, and the people that come there that are involved in this show are very, very good at their craft. I mean, they are great independent talent. All of them want to make the big show, and some of them will. In fact, one of the guys that has been a regular at the AWF is a kid named Alex Taylor, who is now the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. So this is one of the most tradition-laden historic championships. It's given to a wrestler who is of world-class status, but is not a heavyweight. You're looking at someone who's 170, 180, 190 pounds, something like that. 190 is getting close to heavyweight, but so you're looking at a guy who's a little smaller, but wrestling has those weight classes where you have, a bunch of talent that's midweight or smaller weight. So this guy is Billy Corgan's world junior heavyweight champion. His name's Alex Taylor. He's a great talent. He's going big. I mean, he's fantastic. He started with, he was a mainstay in the AWF for a number of years. And so you never know who's going to come through. And then you always have names like Ric Flair has been to our show. The Steiners have been there. Tommy Rich, you name them, they've been through our show. The Road Warriors, they've been there. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, the Outsiders, they've been to our show. I mean, it's like
Mick Foley.
Mick Foley's been there. Yep. Mick Foley and I watched the SEC championship together a couple of years ago, covering a show. So just hanging out with Mick Foley.
So you, one of our APs at our school, Tobin Davidson, used to be in the WCW.
Mm-hmm.
You got George the Animal Steel, Tito Santana, Matt Stryker, Michelle McCool. If you just a simple Google search shows that there's a pretty extensive history of school teachers
Yep.
moonlighting as professional wrestlers. Why do you think that connection exists?
I think because wrestling is performance art, and there's something about it that appeals to, there's this stigma or this stereotype that wrestling is this like redneck trailer park. And there's nothing wrong with redneck or trailer park. Don't get me wrong with that. I don't mean to insult anybody, but there's a stigma that is like this low form of
lowbrow.
Lowbrow, it's crass and that kind of thing. And it's really not. I mean, I think one of its great appeals is that it appeals to everybody. It doesn't matter where you are. You look at guys like Raven or Mick Foley. We mentioned him. These are highly intelligent people that know multiple languages. You've got Britt Baker, who is one of the biggest female stars in the world. She is a dentist. I mean, she's a legit doctor, like a medical doctor, I mean, and you've got Mae Valentine, Maria Diaz Gomez, whose father was a great Brazilian artist. And she is a distinguished author in her own right. And these are people that are accomplished people who find in pro wrestling, again, they find morality plays, they find mythology, they find a creative outlet. And I think that you look at somebody like Billy Corgan. I think Billy Corgan is the perfect representative of this, or someone like Paul Lee at the local level. Billy Corgan loves baseball. He is a rock god. He's the head of an empire called Lightning One Enterprises that does more than just music. He also owns, a media company. He has a tea shop in Chicago. He's a philanthropist. And the NWA is one of his passions that is under this umbrella. But, he's a creative guy. You look at, great, athletes like Curtis Granderson, who played, baseball for the Yankees, the New York Mets, the Marlins. I mean, these are people that love pro wrestling because of the creative outlet it provides. And so it's no surprise to me at all that you find educators who are trying to instill that creative impulse in kids to find this satisfaction in the world of pro wrestling.
So how has wrestling, I don't know if improved is necessarily the word, but affected the way that you approach being an administrator at a public school?
That's a great question. I have a lot of influences. Wrestling is one of them. Being a military person is one of them. Being a Christian is one of them, and so all these things play into it. I think, in my community, and you and I work in the same school, we have the same community. I think it's given me some, it's given me some street cred, maybe. Does that make sense at all? I mean, people come to the show and they're like, oh, he's not uptight, I also go to the public pool every day. So I see my community there too. So they know I'm a human being, but I can go to this show and there's no pretension there. I'm playing a character who's a really mean guy. But then when the show's over, I come out and I hang out and I let them know, hey, I still love you. I'm here. My job here is to be mean, but that's not who I am. But, I think just doing that and, in a sport that's very vibrant in the Deep South, especially in Georgia, where there's a lot of historic courses, I think it's given me some credibility that, I think I would have credibility in other ways through some of the other, things that I've had in my life, privileges, and experiences that I've been able to have. But wrestling it just gives me a leg up, I think, and again, like I'm not afraid. I'm attention hungry. So I don't turn down an opportunity to have the microphone. Like when Katie Justice, our family engagement lady, hey, we want to do this event or video. I'm like, let's do it. I love it. Anytime I get a chance to be in the spotlight, I like to do that. So wrestling is just one of those things. And all the kids, they know me as Robbie Roode, or they call me John Wick or Robbie Roode or one of those things. It just gives me, like I said, a bit of credibility that I might not otherwise have. I don't know.
I like it. So if somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, you know what? I think becoming, a professional wrestler is going to be the side hustle for me. What advice would you give them for getting started?
I would say think hard about it because it's not easy. Wrestling is if you're talking about being a worker, a talent, wrestling is a safe sport. Don't get me wrong. And let me just let me break, pull the veil back. What you see in wrestling is real. It's a physical thing. I mean, obviously you've got some storytelling going on and that kind of thing, but it's a very physically demanding and grueling sport. You've got to be in great shape. You can't just wake up one day and decide, hey, I want to be a bad guy, or hey, I want to go in there and do this. You've got to go to school. And most regions have a trainer that will train you, and you want to look for a good trainer, someone who's got a pedigree, someone whose students have made it to the big show, or someone who's got some longevity. Paul Lee, I don't know if he still trains. He might take on students now, but you've got a lot of local regional guys that will take on talent, or prospective talent to train. So you got to put in a lot of hard work. You got to be in great shape. You got to be committed to it. This isn't something where you've got to be, you're going to be flipping because when you walk into it, everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to walk out there, I'm going to be in the main event because, I think I can do this and that. I'm just going to steal the show. What you don't realize is for the first several years, you're going to be breaking down the ring and putting, at the end of the night, or putting it up at the start of the show. You're going to be doing, grunt work, as it were. You're going to be folding out chairs. You're going to be cleaning up, blood. Sometimes, you're going to be cleaning up a lot of stuff. You're going to be cleaning up thumbtacks. You're going to be running errands. I mean, you've got to pay your dues. First of all, that's probably the biggest thing. Be prepared to pay your dues, put in hard work, but don't give up, and don't, there are a lot of gatekeepers out there. Like, in any industry, there are people that are gatekeepers. They're just negative, and they're not going to promote you or not going to encourage you. Don't listen to them. Block them out. Surround yourself with people that are going to uplift you. And, you set your goals and be realistic about your goals. Like, if your goal is, hey, I've never wrestled before in my life, and in 1 year, I want to be in the WWE. That's probably not going to happen, but in a year, you could probably make an in-ring appearance at a local show. And then you want to be a fixture at a show. Then you want to kind of start taking bookings regionally. I want to start taking bookings since we live in Georgia. If I was just starting in, I would start seeking bookings throughout North Georgia and Northern Alabama, Eastern Tennessee. And you kind of grow your after school empire, as it were, and start doing that. But wrestling is not your typical side hustle. It's not, it's more of it's a passion. It's like me, I can make a lot more money doing this. Like with the AWF, I'm not going to make a killing doing the AWF stuff. It's a passion project. I was making pretty decent income with the NWA, but it's not, it's one of those things where you got to realize you're balancing. It's like if you're in the community theater, again, like I said, or you're doing roller derby or something like that, you're not going to make your main living doing that. You might be able to years down the road after years and years of work, but it's not all about money. It's about, fulfillment. It's about, again, work-life balance and finding something that gives you, worth. And, I love wrestling because I love the creativity. I like to entertain people. I do like the spotlight, but I like seeing the spark, like in Avid's eyes, man, how he just, it blew his mind, and, like, just like at school, when kids come into our building, I want to blow their minds. And when I'm in the Circus Tent Arena, I want to blow people's minds.
Yeah, that's a great transition. I was going to say, if people wanted to learn more about the AWF, they wanted to maybe pick up a Robbie Roode Enterprises t-shirt or something, where can we find you online?
So you can find me on all the social medias at Real Doc Stinson. I do have a Robbie Roode Facebook page, and I interact on that not as often as I ought to. The AWF, I think I just misspoke. The address is awfwow.com, and you can buy tickets there to all the shows. Typically, they will perform live at the Circus Tent Arena in Ringgold, Georgia, the first Saturday of every month. And there are select months, 4 or 5 months a year, where they'll do 2 shows. If you choose to come, again, most of these events are family friendly. If you see an event like a cage match event, you got to realize there's probably going to be some blood. It's going to be a little more gruesome, and it might not be appropriate for young kids. But all in all, it is a family friendly show. You're not going to see a lot of, lewdness, or you're not going to see like Attitude Era nudity, that kind of stuff. That's not going to happen at our show.
It was clean enough that the time he was 4, I took my 4-year-old and didn't feel, aside from people beating each other up, anything content-wise that was inappropriate for him.
Right. Yeah. And, kids wrestle, boys wrestle. They do that. It's in their DNA to do that, So most shows doors typically open at 6:30. Bell time is usually at 8:00, and you can get any seat in the building except for VIP seats or ringside seats. You can get them for $10. And Neely, I think you were sitting in the bleacher seating.
Yeah,
and they're great seats. They're great seats.
There's not a bad seat in the house.
No. So you can do that. If you want to follow the NWA, you can follow them at nwa.com. And they are, again, just a fabulous promotion, the most historic, tradition-laden promotion in the world. So you can follow them. If you want to follow Billy Corgan, you can follow the Smashing Pumpkins on social media. And who knows, if you private message him, he might respond if you let him know you're a wrestling fan. So
awesome. Well, Dr. Rob, you are phenomenal. Like I said, you are not only a blessing to me and my family, but the community you serve is very privileged to have you as an admin here. And thanks for taking time to tell us a little bit about your awesome side hustle as a professional wrestler.
I appreciate it, man. It was a lot of fun. We need to do this more often.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you.
For more resources and support, be sure to visit www.afterschoolempire.com and sign up for my mailing list. I promise not to spam you, and you'll be the first to know about new side hustle resources that are available from After School Empire. Until next time, remember, people want to give you money. You just have to find a reason for them to do so.